Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This week is show we're talking about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 2, Episode 3 of We Hunt Together. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I love the Lola and Jackson stuff. Those two, when they just make such a neat pair. I love it. Just like the back and forth between them when he's like, Marco, she's like, who the fuck is Marco? And he was like, Marco Polo. She's like, who the fuck is Polo? I'm like, how have you never heard of Marco Polo before? Why is that just like not clicking for her? But because they were looking for any connection to say like, okay, because obviously Jackson's psychologist friend is saying that, right, the psychopathy behind this is that whoever killed Robert is because he was kind of seen as a potential love interest. I was like, not unless we end up finding out Robert's doing a major fake out and pretending like he was murdered when in actuality he cut off his finger. Because I didn't even think about this until they replayed the opening again. I was like, oh right, the fact of the matter is he did like also get his fingerprint. So like the finger being there with a fingerprint, it's like, well, that was because the killer left his fingerprints around. But I was like, nah, there's no way. It's like, Robert's really dead. But I was like, it'd be interesting if the twist was that he actually isn't dead. He just faked it. So it's like, oh, by making myself seem so suspicious, I throw you off my trail by making it seem like I wasn't the real killer because I got killed. Like, that could be the twist, but I'm like, nah, it seems like, because it's like, I'm curious where the rest of Robert's body is. That's what's going to be the really interesting thing. Because, like, why else would the killer bother, like, not keeping Robert's body nearby? Because the first victim, it's like you took their fingers, sure, but you left the body behind. I guess it's like, right, you wanted the cops, and in particular, Freddie joined in on this investigation, but now it's like, I guess you don't need to go through that much anymore. But I'm like, why not keep the body then? And not let you, why dispose of it? That's why I'm like, I'm going to leave it open. Like, I'm like 70-30, like 70% sure Robert's dead, but now there's a 30% part of me. It's like, he could be faking this. Like, he could have cut off his own finger. We'll see. That could end up being the twist, but regardless, they find out that Freddie's like recordings from her job when she was working for Larry before, those are out and about because Larry ended up selling them, which Freddie does find out from Jackson and Lola when they go to like question her, at least like warn her, which I love the whole before that they were playing the recordings for Susan and you could tell Susan was kind of getting into it and they stop and she's like, whoa, they're like, ma'am, you don't need to hear the next three things. It's like that what those three things are. And she's like almost looking like, oh God, you just had to ruin my fun. It's just like, and also I just think it's like an interesting little thing of like, while she's sitting there, they're like, oh, we should probably like, Freddie's not a person of interest, but we probably should just warn her just to be safe. And what is she doing the entire time? Tapping her index finger. Like, it always seemed like she was, I mean, I guess for evidence wise, it makes sense why she doesn't want to go as hard after Freddie. But still, it just seems like, I don't know. I'm overthinking it, but there's just something about Susan that just kind of, it just like the fact that they focused on that and she specifically is like, I mean, everyone, like, it could be a thing for people to tap their fingers, but for her to do that, I thought was so interesting. And they made such a point of it. I'm like, there's something there. Maybe not. I'm just probably like severely overthinking things, but I just thought that was so fascinating. But like I said, I love the just Lola and Jackson. There's just so many good moments when they run into Liam later on, and you can tell like Lola's kind of feeling the whole Liam thing. She's kind of telling him to kind of fuck off, but at the same time, it's like, oh, there's something there. And Jackson's smiling, his goofy smile the entire time. And he's like, oh yeah, that seems like a nice, nice young man. And she's like, fuck off. And then it's just the whole situation where it's like, because Dom's supposed to be keeping an eye on Freddie because Lola happened to notice a necklace she's wearing that has a ring at the end of it. So it's like, hey, the first victim we haven't found his wedding ring. So there's a good chance that might have been it. So neither her nor Jackson can get too close without, Freddie being wary of it. So they try to get Dom on it. It's like, and Lola's like, get close. But Jackson's like, don't get too close. And the back and forth, get close. Don't get close, Dom. And, Jackson's pulling the phone further away so Dom can't hear Lola. And poor Dom is kind of caught in between. She's like, yes, sir. Like, because she's not cut out to be, she's like, I think a crime scene analyst might be like her job description, might like be the more apt description of what her, but it's like, right, she's not a police officer, she doesn't know about undercover work, tailing someone and stuff like that, so she's kind of like nervous about being put in this position, especially because they asked her and her SO over to dinner, and just for them to kind of blindside her and ask her for this. I love that as they're doing this couples talk, it's just kind of like the back and forth of just like, and Jackson be like, oh yeah, I think I'd make a good pregnant man, and they're like, oh, like Arnie, he's like, yeah, I've always looked at myself and wondered like he's like, I always thought I was kind of like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, like being the person that he could compare to, and I love that Lola's kind of bored out of her mind, she's like literally rolling her face against the glass. I love that, it's so good. But I also love Lola and Liam. It does seem like this kind of, I mean, Liam's a little suspicious, but I think he is someone that is trying to get the best story, because we find out he actually wrote a novel, but no one read it, so now he writes biographies. I guess that's kind of implying like Freddy isn't the first person's biography that he wrote, but he's trying to get both perspectives on things, because he's like, okay, do you like, especially from Lola's perspective, it's like, you are one of the people that's adamant about Freddy's guilt, but it's like, couldn't it just be that she's innocent? But it's like, yeah, it's all, Lola doesn't buy it. She knows Freddy's responsible. Jackson does too, but yeah. Turns out Liam, we also find out he's been divorced for about 3 years. We also find out it's been about 4 years for Lola. And it's just like, oh, together we've had like 7 years. Oh, we must have broken a mirror. And Liam's like, no, that's not. Broken mirror is 7 years bad luck. I think the whole, like, I think he was implying like the whole not locking eyes the entire time during the cheers, which I wonder, is that specifically a British thing, or is that just a thing in general? I've never heard that before, like breaking eye contact during the cheers. I was like, I think that's such an interesting thing. I've never heard that before. I wonder, is that something he made up? But, because I was wondering if something was actually going to happen between them, because I was like, Lola was so adamant about it not happening, but then they kind of get swept up in the moment, because I think he's kind of charming in his own right, so I think he kind of like, Lola was probably a combination of, it's been 4 years, plus, you're not too bad, so, like, it's also interesting, like, getting to see, like, Lola, like, laugh and be, because, like, let's face it, like, a lot of times, like, she's very, like, not stoic, but she's just very, like, she scowls and she's just kind of like, the fuck, like, she's like, what the fuck? Like, she's kind of got that about her. So, like, to see her kind of, like, a little giddy and stuff like that was kind of like a side of her we rarely get to see, and I thought that was actually really cute. I mean, yeah, like, sometimes interactions between her and Jackson, she smiles, but she's usually like, oh, like, she's kind of usually annoyed or bothered by something Jackson's doing. Like, later on, he's, like, breathing in and out because the guy he was trying to give the teddy bear to check out, like, oh, I need to find out, like, what music is playing in this bear. And he's breathing in and out, and Lola's pulling the phone down because she was on the phone with Dom, almost looking at him because she's so annoyed by his breathing in and out, like, meditation thing. But it's like, yeah, like I said, with Liam, she was having fun. But we saw with Liam's shoes, they're red, but they're blue on the side. And Diane never said anything about that. She would have said, because if you would have saw, like, they're clearly, like, blue on the side. So you probably would have noticed something like that. Because I'm trying to think, like, I think the position his foot was in, you wouldn't have been able to see the blue last episode when he stuck his foot in the doorway when Lola was trying to close it. You only saw the red, because the top of it is red, but the sides are blue. And considering Diana saw the shoes, she probably would have seen... Is it Diane or Diana? The Freddy's neighbor who saw the shoes last... Who, when the killer... the Birdman dropped it off at the package at her place. She would have noticed the blue too, because like it's very probably you would have been like, oh, the shoes are red and blue, so they're solely red, which we'll get to that in a second. But it shows like right, so Liam's kind of off this suspect list. I think even at the end when he's taking a picture. I think maybe he's trying to make more of a name for himself. So you kind of feel bad because you kind of feel like he's just using Lola to, for the sake of the book. I think legitimately he does like her, but it is a means to an end as well to get what he wants. And I think because when he tried to put the picture back from where Freddy drew like that eye symbol, he tried to put the picture back, but you could tell it was kind of crooked. I think Lola's going to find out he was messing around in her place, and she's not going to like that. I love that Jackson showed up with flea spray, and she was pissed at him, like, flea spray, really? And as he's closing the door, you get to see Liam scratching a little. It's like, yeah, I thought that would have come. I thought she would have been more like, oh, let's go back to your place. But to be fair, we know that he's living out of a van, So that's probably the only reason why that happens. Probably like, oh, we probably should go to your place type of thing. So I love Freddy's confrontation with Larry because she's trying to get back her tapes. I don't know whether because I guess Larry's kind of moved up in the world after everything went down previously, because I don't know if it doesn't seem like he's working the same business, because that place was pretty big, but not unless he's just scaled up his operations or whatever. But I love that he's like, yeah, having this party celebrating like the pigeon killer. She's like, yeah, but that almost implies like he kills pigeons. And Larry's like, right. He's like, wait. He's like, shit. He's like, I already made 5,000 of these. But Freddy's like, yeah, give me back my recordings. Yeah, or I can always come back here and burn this place to the ground. He's almost laughing because he's like, oh, you wouldn't do that. But then he's like, looks at Freddy and it's like, yeah, you're kind of dead serious. So I'll try and track that down. She looks it up and finds out the person who bought it is some chief intendant named Lester. She goes and visit him, and he just seems like a pretty normal dude. But going through his stuff, she sees the red shoe, so it's like, huh. And then she sees he's got all this like sex stuff. They have a cage, which he says is for a dog. I thought the twist was going to be like, oh, Freddy's going to be wary of him. She's got like a razor blade behind her, kind of a razor switchblade behind her back. And we're going to find out that, like, no, the fact is the cage also has a lock on it. I was kind of like, I don't know. That definitely seemed weird and more on the kinky side of things. But then he has like Freddy like shave him, and it's like, oh yeah, and he's like, oh, Freddy, this girl is, because he's, talking from a third person perspective and not from like their perspectives, because it's like, oh yeah, the girl, she's never killed anyone before, which is like, well, technically she killed Kian last season, but to be fair, she didn't directly have to do it. All she had to do was push him in the water and he drowned. So it's not the same thing. It's not as hands-on as some of the deaths Baba, some of the kills Baba got last season. So it's never been hands-on of like being fully directly responsible for the life draining out of somebody. So killing someone with like a blade, like she couldn't do it last season when it came to Darren, just like, and it's interesting because Baba called her out about that, and now this Lester dude's doing the same thing. So he's like, right, and you thought Baba was fun because she is someone that is so interested in, it's like, right, he was kind of implying like you surround yourself with like kind of that darkness of people because you find it so intriguing. So, but she does find Lester intriguing, and it's like, oh, where should I bring these, like, those recordings? And she's like, oh, Larry's pigeon killer party. So she goes. Dom points Jackson and Lola in that direction. Interestingly enough, Dom and her SO end up running into Jill, and it's like Jill starts acting a little dodgy the moment she runs into them, and they're like, oh, I didn't know you'd be here, blah, blah, and you're like, why is she acting so weird? And then I was like, wait, is this? And then Thomas walks up, you're like, no, it's not even Jackson's baby, no! And she's like, yeah, like, she's asking Dom not to say anything. He's like, let me kind of tell Jackson in my own time. You're like, but it's like, right, that affair, which Jackson called her out for last season, it's like, wait, so that's still been going on, which is, once again, I stressed this in the first 2 episodes. It's like, oh, you getting pregnant, it's interesting considering both, you and Jackson made that whole deal of, you'll find time to fall back in love after the kids go to college. It seems like, I guess that still kind of fits in that time frame, but it's like, I guess she's kind of, it's like, it's different from just having an affair. It's like you're having a baby and you're keeping it secret and you're making me think it's, ooh, that's gnarly. Which I think that explains why Dom's there at the end. She was there trying to give, because she was actually going to talk to, because she was like, yo, are you at Larry's? Because she's trying to do the right thing. And it's like, because I think she looks at Jackson as a friend too. So it's like, right, I think, professionally she doesn't have to do that. But I think it's a courtesy as a friend. It's like, right, you invited us to your home and everything, that I should probably tell you the truth about your wife. So, and the baby situation. So, but she didn't get a chance to. So we'll see how that plays out. But I skipped over it, but I thought it was an interesting moment. They ended up talking to Henry a little bit, and he's very dismissive of them when they're questioning him about, like, Freddie's part and all of this, and he's like, whatever, until Lola was like, yeah, because it's like, everyone that gets close to Freddie tends to end up getting hurt. She was pretty close with your sister, which in fact, he confronts her about it, because that's what kept confusing me. I'm like, why would you be around Freddie, considering, like, your mom is pretty intent on believing, like, Freddie had something, Lily had something to do with your sister Frederica's death, so that's why I was so confused by it. But maybe does she not know how much time Henry's spending around Freddie? She might not know about that. I feel like it's such a big part of his life. I mean, maybe it's also because, like, he doesn't want his mom to worry and she would say something, so maybe he hasn't told her. But I'm like, because he confronts her, he's like, whatever happened between you and my sister? She's like, I told you 100 times. He's like, well, tell me again. It's like, well, they say she fell in. I say she jumped, which we know she pushed her in. It's the truth. But once again, you lie to yourself enough, I guess it becomes no longer even second nature. It just becomes the truth to you. Because obviously a lot of stuff last season when it came to the whole Kian and Freddie thing, like, she kind of warped a lot of that in her mind, and she kind of looked back on it like, maybe things weren't what I thought they were. But maybe she's still even now trying to convince herself. I mean, granted, I think she knows deep down, it's like, right, I did it, but she probably still blames Frederica and Kian for her having to kill her friend, but I don't know if that's how she justifies it in her head or not. Either way, but like I said, that just intrigued me. That I guess he never really fully maybe he'd asked about it before because his mom has presented such concerns. But even like, why'd you even take her name? It's like, well, it's my way of honoring her. He's like, yeah, but do you ever think about how that would affect mom? How that would affect me? And he's kind of breaking down a little bit, and then they start making out. I was like, this is weird. And she's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He's like, oh, come on, like you didn't know. I've been in love with you since I was 8 years old, but never good enough, right? And walks away. She just kind of moves on. I think there's also that part of Freddie. I think it's that type of thing of knowing that she's being desired by people. Especially, it's a weird thing considering it's like, right, this is the person who, I don't know if you consider him almost like a little brother, or maybe you've always known how he's felt about you and you like that. Plus, you like murdered his sister and he doesn't know, and how that's all kind of messed him up of like, yeah, you were the last person with his sister. She died the way she did, and now spending so much time. Like, there's just so much that I'm like, that kid's not 100% right. The kid's kind of messed up. I mean, a lot of people are in Freddie's vicinity kind of are. Liam's kind of messed up in his own regard. Henry is too. I think she kind of attracts those type of people. Then there's the whole situation with the bird mask. Where she found the one with the spider on it. At first, I was kind of concerned about it. I was like, whoa, that's not for Freddy to put on because the killer was like right behind her. But then I was like, oh, it's for her to put on somebody. Because I was about to say, right, she's Honeybee and everything. But I was like, is that trying to imply that she's now the spider? But it's like, no, she's Honeybee. And she gave it to Larry to kind of pay him back for everything. But then, like, I was like, oh, man, Larry's going to get it. But then Larry took off the mask and gave it to them, the lady at the front, to just throw it in a bin. I was like, oh, boy. And then Allie comes and she gets a mask. You're like, oh, my God. The irony, especially because Allie had just said, like, earlier in the episode, Freddie, you don't have to pay. You saved my life. Thank you. And it's like, now she's going to be your undoing. And then she finds out Larry's not wearing the mask. It's like, where's the mask? Found it in a bin. Allie had texted her like, yo, I just got this mask out of a bin. It's crazy. And he's like, take it. She's like, where are you? Where are you? And then she texts her, take off your mask. Which the moment she did, and she wasn't the person with the spider mask, you're like, and you see, I was like, and the person got stabbed. Before I even got revealed, I was like, it's Dom, isn't it? It's like, yeah, because she was there trying to talk, wanted to tell, I think it's a situation where she felt like she needed to tell Jackson the truth up front, but it's like the killer stabbed her. I mean, it's not even the target she wanted. Now it's also the fact is you stab someone who's related to the police too. Like, I think she's still like, I don't know if she's considered a detective, but I think she's still, like, obviously as an officer down type of thing, I think she's still kind of considered part of the police in that regard. Like, I don't think, even if she is like a forensic analysis, she might actually be just a full-blown cop. Either way, it's like, that's going to be bad. It's interesting, too, because Lola made a point of saying to Freddie, like, oh, you won't be able to control things or whatever. And Freddie was almost like, what? Because she knows that Freddie's a lot more involved in this situation. And so, once again, it is interesting that Lola, like other people, even Jackson's like, right, just because Freddie isn't afraid, but saying like that's part of her brain's wired that way, that just because she shows no fear doesn't mean she's involved in this, when in actuality she is. Lola was right last season, she continues to be right this season, but it's like, yeah, ironically, like, oh, this is a situation you can't control, and it's going to spiral out from here. I think things are going to start wavering just a little bit, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens next. Hopefully, like, Dom is okay, and the effed up thing is, all those people there just shows you how much of assholes they are. What are they doing? They're all wearing the bird mask, and they're taking pictures of it, and it's just like, oh my god, the bird, like, Birdman killer or whatever, it's like, he did it, blah, 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 like, that's what that's all about to them, and just, like, now pictures of Dom are going to be all over the place. This is also going to screw them up with Susan, because Susan's going to be like, right, this is on you two, because you shouldn't have been there, because they did it without, like, letting Susan know. Because I was kind of thinking Dom was going to be okay, because I'm like, oh, okay, so Dom's not directly involved with Freddie right now. She was still keeping an eye on Freddie, but still. It was never anything where Dom would be in danger. And it's like, ironically enough, her showing up there to try and tell Jackson about his marriage to his wife, about Jill, is what led to all of this. Once again, if they weren't here without permission, then I know this is going to blow back in their faces big time. But what I'm most curious about too is like to see what happens from Freddie's perspective. Also where things with her and Henry go after that whole awkward him kissing you thing. So it's going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.